Okay, so this is a snapshot that we took just 2 weeks ago, the day the legislature was sworn in. We had a bunch of folks at the Capitol doing kind of a meet and greet at all the offices of all the 181 legislators. We had a good time. It's something that we have been doing now for the last at least 3 sessions. It's, keep in mind for next time, you might want to join us and help meet these legislators in a more informal way, and helps to kind of build the relationships over time. So we want to just kind of review the agenda, the basics of the legislative process. So people for whom this is really new can get a sense of, how does this whole thing actually really work? And then we wanted to go over some of TCE's issue priorities, so you can know kind of what we're focused on. And of course, these are other issues will come up during the session, and lots of our allied groups are working on other issues, and we'll give you some more information about how to find out about other issues as well. We're going to cover a little bit of what we see as the key challenges that we have to deal with, because this is not a simple, snap your fingers and everything happens the way you want it to happen by any means. And then what kind of concrete things can you do as someone who wants to have an impact on the process, kind of lay out some of those options, then have enough time for questions and discussion at the end. So Dobbs, can you please take it from here for now?
Sorry, 1 second, let me get him off of mute there.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, whenever I mute myself on here, it makes Mel unmute me, which seems like a slightly inefficient way of doing things. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Like Robin said, my name is Andrew Dobbs. I'm the Legislative Director for Texas Campaign for the Environment. I'm also the Program Director here in Central Texas. And I am just truly honored by all the people that have shown up today. I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about the process of the legislature. This is stuff that, a lot of us learned in school at some point, but a lot of us forget about it, and but it's important to know because this is how it happens. I'm going to cover a few things on this slide here, and then there's a really great infographic I'll switch over to when I go through all the details. First thing to keep in mind is that the Texas legislature was designed by people who were not necessarily interested in the public good, and about 150 years ago almost now. And they, one of the things that they did, and all the other redemption governments did in the 1870s, was they strictly limited the length of the legislative session in order to make it harder for people to get changes through to the state government. Now, we can we're kind of okay with that to a certain extent at this point, because it limits the amount of damage that they can do also. But we only have 140 days for the legislative session. We only do it every other year. For a state as big as ours, a top 10 global economy like Texas, we are still only meeting 140 days every other year. So we have to make every day count when that happens. Because not only is it 140 days every other year, we only have a certain amount of time for bills to get filed and debated on. The last day that they can file bills is March 10th. And as we can tell you, if you're getting your bill filed on March 10th, it's probably not going to go very far. So this is crunch time for us, and it's a lot of work. That's why we're doing this webinar and why we're talking to folks, because it's a many hands make light work kind of scenario. The more of us that we can get involved, the more people that we can get activated on this, the more work that we can get done in this very short period of time, and the more benefits we can secure for the environment here in Texas. I'm actually going to go ahead and skip over to the next slide because it'll help you understand what the meaning of the committees are. This slide shows a very, very, very simplified path from a bill to a law in the state of Texas. And as you can see, it can kind of start on either side of the equation, but you start out with a bill idea. And really, you can you could kind of have a little piece of this that's above the bill that talks about, a group like ours or citizens like the ones that have asked us to work on the issues that we care about, come up with an idea, and they say this is something that there ought to be a law. There's something that needs to be changed. We go through and we will work with them to hone the idea into something that can actually be meaningful legislation. Then we'll work with advocates and allies and whatnot to really craft that into something that we then take to a legislative office, and that legislative office will then take it to what's known as the Texas Legislative Council. It's a bunch of attorneys that what they do is they write the laws and they write the bills that are going to become the laws in the state of Texas. I'm actually turning concepts into the legalese that it takes to make it have the force of law. That process is something that can take a while. And if you come in today looking for a bill to be drafted, it's going to take a little while, and you're going to be getting closer and closer to that March 10th date that we just talked about. The good news is that this session we've gotten pretty much most of our bills are either drafted at this point or are in the process of being drafted and should be released to us any day now. So that's good. Sometimes we've been at this point just still looking for somebody to send it over to the Legislative Council. But once they get bills written, then your bill sponsor can do what they call drop the bill, right? Which is where they file it. And when they file it, it's assigned a number. And then whichever chamber it's assigned to assigns it to the appropriate committee. In the House, the Speaker of the House assigns bills to committees. In the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor assigns those bills to committees. And those once again, in the previous slide we had, let me see if let's see here. I think I can go back. Yeah, some of the key committees that we deal with in the House, obviously the most common is the House Environmental Regulation Committee. In the Senate, it's the Senate Natural Resources and Economic Development Committee. We also sometimes get things in energy resources. In the House, also urban affairs is where our single-use bag ordinance bills have gone. And then we'll get to the calendars here in a second. But the committee is a crucial part of the process that we're going to need people's help with, because this is the one chance that the public gets to show up and speak up on this legislation. This is where you can come to Austin, or if you live here, you can come to the Capitol and speak to the bills and say why you want them to become laws. And the legislators have to give you some time to listen to you. The good news is that we get that opportunity. The bad news is that we may only have 72 hours between when they announce when the hearing is going to be and when they have the hearing. And then on the day of the hearing, sometimes it'll be posted at like 10 a.m. or something like that, but they actually get to your bill at like 5 or 6 in the afternoon. It is very much a process of hurry up and wait. But those committee hearings are where they hear that if a majority of the committee, now the committee chair has absolute power to determine when bills are heard or if they're heard, and then when or if they're voted on. So that's why we got to be nice to those committee chairs. And if you happen to live in a district with the chairs of these committees, you're going to be hearing from us a lot. But once those committee chairs have had those hearings, if a majority votes to pass it out of committee, then it moves along the process. If they can't get a majority vote, they usually just let it die. They just never take it up again. There are very few no votes ever taken in the legislature. They usually don't pick things up. After that, it goes through the committee. In the House, it goes to another committee called the Calendars Committee. All they do is schedule bills for votes. And historically, what they've done is they've allowed each member the right to hold bills, right? To say that for a day or a couple of days that bill will not be voted out. That's why these members become very powerful. And for a few weeks in the spring of odd-numbered years, Todd Hunter from Corpus Christi, or whoever else the calendar's chair happens to be, becomes the most powerful person in the state, or one of them. It's a fascinating process. After that, it gets scheduled for a floor vote. And in the Senate, they don't have a calendars committee. They have an intent calendar, which is set by the Lieutenant Governor. So Dan Patrick has absolute power, and he is the most powerful person in Texas the rest of the time. But these bills get set for votes, and then they have if the Speaker, the Lieutenant Governor, or the Calendars Committee decide to schedule these for votes, they have a floor debate. It's voted on. If it's passed out, then it goes to the other side, and it goes through the entire process again. As you might be able to tell, this process is designed not to pass bills, but to kill them. And of the thousands of bills that are filed every session, about a fifth of them, about 20%, actually pass into law, and most of those are real simple local bills that are non-controversial. Things like the stuff that we want to do, it is very challenging. But the good news is that we've got folks like y'all that are doing this, that are here to help us, and the work that we do every day with our canvassers and with our organizers make that possible. We're going to have a period for questions later on. I know that's a lot of ground to cover, but that's the basic process of how a bill becomes a law in the state of Texas. Melanie, if we wanted to, now we do have several bills that we're working on. We have some priorities that we've set for this session. I wanted to go ahead and give us a chance to go through these one by one so that y'all can learn about the things that we're up to and see how we're working this process right now. So Melanie, I think you had the first one. Do you want to take a second to talk about that?
Sure. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Melanie Scruggs. I'm the program director in our Houston office here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our battery take-back bill that we're working on this legislative session. And I just want to take a moment to remind everybody, if you just hopped on, that you can ask a question in the chat, the group chat box there, and we'll be discussing those questions at the end of the webinar. And if you use speaker view on this application, then you'll be able to see the speaker and the slides a little bit more conveniently. Okay, so we're working to pass legislation this year to create a statewide recycling program for household batteries. And that's one of our top priorities for 2017. If we have talked to you at your door over the years, you may remember that we have successfully worked to get recycling programs in Texas for televisions and computers statewide. And we did that by campaigning to get the manufacturers of those products to support legislation that we then passed in 2007 and in 2011, which create these statewide producer take-back programs for recycling electronic waste. And since those laws have been passed, we have recycled over 180 million pounds of electronics in Texas. So after we were working on those campaigns, a lot of the people that we would talk to at the door would say to us, well, what do I do with household batteries, like single-use, AA's, and AAA's? And this is the solution for that problem as well. The EPA estimates that about 250 million single-use and rechargeable batteries are thrown into Texas landfills every year. We're working with a Republican representative named Rodney Anderson from the Grand Prairie area. Anybody here on the call from North Texas, Grand Prairie area? Perhaps some of the phone callers are. He authored the bill for us in 2015. That bill received a hearing in the House Environmental Regulations Committee, but did not pass. And we're working with Rodney Anderson's office again this year to move that bill forward. It has not been filed yet, so we do not have a bill number, but we expect it will be very soon. If we go to the next slide, it explains a little bit about how effective this type of legislation is. This type of producer take-back recycling program is in place in Vermont right now. And what they found is that before having this type of producer responsibility program, the state they were only collecting less than 900 pounds of household batteries, single-use batteries every year. But within just a year of passing this, that went up by 1,400%. And they also found that the rechargeable battery recycling rate almost doubled, even though the legislation wasn't specifically about rechargeable batteries, simply because it made the drop-offs more convenient so that you can take your batteries to retail drop-offs that are hosted by your local government, and it doesn't have to be paid for by your local tax dollars. If you go to the next slide, you'll see another reason why this type of issue is so important. Over a third of active monitored landfills in Texas are reported leaking. And this is a major problem because, as you can see where those red dots are, those are the leakers. They are situated near to waterways and on top of our aquifers. So Texas Campaign for the Environment works to enact policies that keep toxic chemicals out of our landfills, and get manufacturers to help take responsibility for that toxic product. When manufacturers have some responsibility for the end of life of their product, then they have an economic incentive to design their products to be sustainable with the end of life in mind. And this is a key element of what we call zero waste, which is our overall goal in Texas, getting to a point where all of the products that we use are safe for the environment, are recyclable or compostable. Producer take-back is one element of that. So look forward to working on the battery take-back bill with our supporters and allies this year. Now Dobbs is going to talk about our second priority, which is the sewage sludge issue.
Yeah, before I do that, I wanted to give just to give everybody kind of a status report on where the battery bill is. Remember I said that getting bills drafted is can be a big time consumer. The good news is we got that bill drafted before the session even began, so it's ready to file at any point. We can be filed tomorrow, but the author wanted to wait for a report that was going to be released by the House Environmental Regulation Committee that we expect to be favorable to the bill. There have been some unique interruptions to getting that published, but that should be this week. There's going to be a decision made on how that's going to go down. Once that's decided, we should be able to get that bill filed, hopefully by next week at the latest. Once that happens, be tuned in for a bill number that we'll be working on for that. So the next thing I wanted to work on here is, or the next thing that we're talking about here has to do with sewage sludge. This is one of those, sorry about that. This is one of those things that a lot of us don't necessarily want to think about, and that we're actually trained not to think about in our culture, is what happens with the stuff that goes down the drain. And the fact is that our wastewater goes to wastewater treatment plants where the water is then treated, and the solids are separated out from the water. The water is put back into the environment, and then we're left with these solids. What do we do with them? Historically, they just kind of dumped them in the ocean or into rivers. That was obviously a really terrible idea. It killed a lot of wildlife and wreaked a lot of havoc, so they started landfilling it. That's also a really bad idea. That's what creates a lot of the harms. Living next to a landfill, the smell, the bugs and the other vermin that come around and whatnot, it's a very bad process. What they've started doing now, to a great extent, is they've started using it as fertilizer, which there's some fertilizer capacity to it. It's also got a lot of pathogens, obviously, which can make people sick. It's got a lot of, it's got all the stuff that we talk about, that TCE and other groups have campaigned on in terms of household toxics, things like phthalates, like BPA and other plasticizers, flame retardants, various chemicals like that. And it also has a lot of pharmaceuticals in it. So putting it on the land is not a particularly good idea. Now, we also know we are very much part of the art of the possible, and there's a lot of people that are making a lot of money off of this, and so we don't anticipate being able to end that process. It's also true that there's not a whole lot of great alternatives. Composting it is a better alternative, but there's still a lot of challenges associated with that. What we want to do is we want to get it out of the floodplains and stop putting this stuff where it's going to wash into our waterways. It seems like kind of a no-brainer to us. We're also working to make sure that the permitting process on this is strengthened, and that industrial wastes, like from grit and grease traps, are not going to be land applied. So we're working with a lot of allies, and we're working with the office of Senator Lois Kolkhorst on legislation. I got word from her office yesterday that they are very close to finishing up on the draft of that. We should have something filed on that in the next week or two also. So also stay tuned for that. One other thing we wanted to put here is a lot of people, when we tell them that this is happening, don't really believe it. They can't imagine that somebody would break, the kind of basic rule of don't do that. But this is a great graphic that we've come up with to show that very undeniably and obviously this is an unpleasant and unsafe process. So you can see that there. The next, I wanted Robin to talk about some of the stuff that we're working on by way of single-use bags. Robin, take it away.
This is an issue that we've been working on for quite a while now. For the last 4 legislative sessions, the previous 4 legislative sessions, there have been bills introduced that would have preempted and told local governments that they cannot pass ordinances related to single-use carry-out bags. There's a lot of reasons why communities are concerned about this issue. I've listed a few of the reasons there. You can see there's so many different reasons, in part because there's so many different places in Texas that have passed bag ordinances. And those, we have a map of those cities. There has been a bill introduced already, Senate Bill 103, and that bill would say basically local governments cannot do anything to prohibit retail stores from passing out single-use bags. So that is a bill that we will work to defeat. We don't know yet which Senate committee it will be in. Generally, these bills go to Senate Natural Resources. Conceivably, they could go to the Senate Business and Commerce Committee is another one. Then on the House side, most recently, these bills have been going to the House Urban Affairs Committee. We are also concerned because the Laredo bag ordinances was struck down this summer by a state court, and Laredo is appealing to the Texas Supreme Court. They haven't decided if they're going to take it or not. So we're looking at our legislative options with regards to the language in the state law that's already there that is a problem. There's the map that shows kind of where all the bag ordinances are. Those are the ones in blue. The ones in red, Galveston and Corpus Christi are cities that are looking into bag ordinances, and then Laredo is the one that has been struck down. You can see that a lot of these have been in the southern part of the state. And the most recent one was the city of Eagle Pass. That law went into effect January 1st of this year and was put in place largely because of flooding problems and how bags clogged up their stormwater runoff systems. In Fort Stockton, it was an issue of cattle. In Freer, it was the problem of being a city that had a big increase in the population during the Eagle Ford shale, and then they depend a lot on tourism, especially hunters coming to their community. So you can see it's very diverse cities, and we want to make sure that we have local control for single-use bags. Local control is going to be a big issue on a lot of different fronts. And we're working closely with our allies and city governments to push back on this again. So next up, Dobbs, you can talk about our Railroad Commission.
Yeah, so thanks, Robin. So this is another set of issues that we're going to be working on this session. This is one of those things that other groups are definitely leading on and that we are providing a crucial benefit to and boost to and working in coalition with many others. This is kind of a top priority for the environmental movement this legislative session. The Texas Railroad Commission is up for sunset review. Now, that is a phrase that has a lot of weird words in it. The first that I want to point out is there's a reason why we have this picture here of the I don't know which direction I'm in actually, of the sign with a no symbol around the train, and that's because the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with trains whatsoever. The Texas Railroad Commission is our oil and gas and energy regulatory agency in the state of Texas. And so the powers that be are very much okay with people not paying attention to what they're up to, and so they have gone out of their way to keep that name, to keep people from paying attention. Now, every state agency on a 12-year basis is up for sunset review. This means that the state government reviews their agency's operations for effectiveness, efficiency, and other concerns, and then suggests any changes that need to be made. They have to affirmatively reauthorize that agency, or else it disappears and goes out of existence, and that's an opportunity for them to make fixes. This is an opportunity. This year, the Railroad Commission is up for sunset review, and we are hoping to get some changes at that agency. Now, the biggest thing that we've really focused on has been about enforcement of the law at this agency. Right now, under the way that the agency operates, they keep almost no data about their enforcement. And their enforcement philosophies are such that they're more about getting companies to start obeying the law rather than actually punishing anybody for failing to obey the law. These two facts come together and make it very easy to just serially disobey the law and have no consequences as a result. Company violates the law. They get inspected once every several years at most by the Railroad Commission. They get inspected. They're found to have been breaking the law. The Railroad Commission doesn't fine them or punish them. They just say, "Hey, start obeying the law." So the company does. Then as soon as they've gotten that done, they start breaking the law again. 3, 5, 10 years later, they get inspected again. And rather than saying, "Hey, you know what? You were breaking this law before. You're breaking it again. You're a scofflaw and a recidivist, so we're going to throw the book at you." The agency does the exact same thing they did the first time and say, "Hey, just start obeying the law," over and over and over and over again. And the result is that we have a lot of oil and gas operators. You can see from the next slide, this is kind of the image here is a little bit blurry. Sorry about that. But it's very clear that red is oil wells, blue or red is gas wells, blue is oil wells. There's a lot of oil and gas in the state of Texas. And the result is that if we don't enforce these laws better, we're going to really cause a lot of harm. We're causing a lot of harm to our environment. The good news is that there have been some proposed improvements that we understand that the bill will improve these things and improve data collection. It's a step in the right direction. It's not sufficient, but it's a step in the right direction. The other big issue that a lot of our allies have worked on the two other big issues that we've worked on and our allies have worked on is one, what's known as induced seismicity, causing earthquakes through oil and gas operations. There's been some good suggestions of better data collection that should help us to advocate for better policies in the future. That's a step in the right direction. Once again, not sufficient, but it's something to move forward with. And then the last piece of that, it has to do with abandoned wells. You can see from this image, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of wells. When an operator abandons them, which happens thousands of times in this state, the state doesn't have the resources to clean them up. The business went away. They don't have the resources. And these things end up wreaking a lot of havoc on the environment around the state. We need policies that are going to make companies take financial responsibility for their operations so that we can prevent this from happening in the future. So that's something that we're going to be working on with our allies. That is the Railroad Commission. The last thing I wanted to talk about here real quick on specific issues that we're focused on has to do with the way that we issue permits for polluting facilities in the state of Texas. One thing has to do with permitting for landfills. That first point there is mostly about landfills. There are some specific things. There have been some specific challenges having to do with specific landfills, especially in East Texas, that have proven that the system is broken. And the good news is we have conservative lawmakers that are interested in doing something about this and interested in tightening that process up and making it so that it's not so easy for polluters to be able to just build bad landfills that will cause harm to people in the future. The details on that are still being worked out. That's why I'm talking in kind of broad and vague terms. But we're definitely working with a couple of offices on improving that process, and there's a lot of appetite for that right now. And frankly, if it comes to the Senate Natural Resources Committee, we look at that committee and we see a lot of folks that know the facts about these kinds of facilities, and we believe that we could get some good laws passed this year. The other piece of this has to do with where permanent application information is kept. Right now, for most permanent applications, not waste. In waste, this is already the situation I'm about to describe is already happening. But for most permanent applications, the permanent application is about yay wide, and I'm a big guy, so this is wide when it's filed, and it's filed at local libraries. It's not available anywhere but the library. So if they're pitching a landfill in your community, or not a landfill because it's already like that, they're pitching a coal-fired power plant or a concrete batch plant or some other polluting facility for your community, you have to go to the library and copy the thing. That can be really prohibitively expensive for people, and a lot of times they get to the library and it ain't there. This would say all you have to do is just provide us with a web link where we can find this application on the internet. You know, the thing that was started in the 90s and that we should start putting things on if we're going to be a state in the 21st century. This is a very simple thing. It doesn't have to cost them any money. They can literally put it on a Google Drive, and that would be sufficient under the law. We are looking forward to Representative Jessica Farrar filing this bill. We'll be moving forward on it. Stay tuned for that as well. So those are the four those are like the 5 issue areas that we're really working on this year: batteries, sludge, bags, railroad commission, and permitting. So what can y'all do to help us get these things passed? Because I think this sounds like a pretty good deal. Robin, you wanna take this away?
Thanks, Melanie. Before we talk about kind of the 1, 2, 3, what you can do, you know, there's the big picture in terms of the key challenges. Dobbs has covered some of that, but you know, a big one is the corporate lobbies. There are medical device companies that don't want to put batteries that are maybe a few cents more expensive in their devices. That includes toothpaste, automatic toothbrush companies. Then you have the retailers and the chemical companies that work together against us on the bag issue, and the oil and gas industry, of course, which has an inordinate amount of power in the state of Texas. Then in addition to all these areas, there's clearly going to be bills that we don't like, that we are going to have to work defense. We don't always know what's coming at us, and we want to make sure that we don't lower the standards even further than they already are, that we maintain public input into the process of pollution permits. And then just overall, the system does not, you know, it has benefits to big money interests that put a lot into campaigns of elected officials, or that spend a lot of money hiring lots of lobbyists to make their case and be at the Capitol in force. You know, the folks back home don't necessarily get as much respect as we deserve. So those are some of the challenges that we face, and we face them really every session. And luckily, there are ways to surmount some of these challenges. And that's where you come in. So one of the things that is a really good thing to be doing, especially right now, while before the legislature gets really going in a big way, is to have a meeting with your state legislator, your state senator, your state representative in their district office, with either them or one of their staffers. Generally, they're in their district offices on Fridays, especially right about now. They don't have any committee meetings right now or floor sessions on a Friday just yet. So that is a really good way to start to build a relationship, so that they start to look to you as a source of information for them. That's one thing that we would like to work with you as if this is something you're willing to do. Another thing is to attend TCE's Advocacy Day, which is March 27th. We will fan out and go to every single office. And when we have constituents with us, especially constituents who have started to develop a relationship with that office, it is really, really important. We will, you know, often have stacks and stacks of letters, so they know that constituents back home support it, but to have an actual live person there who can talk about why these issues are important to them and people in the community that they are supposed to be representing, that makes a world of difference. So we hope you'll consider joining us here in Austin on March 27th for that.
And I just posted a link in the chat, and we'll also send this to you at the end of the webinar. But this is a link for you to register for either one of those opportunities, to meet with your representative and senator in the district, or to attend Lobby Day. Now, in order to make the most of these meetings, we need to know your district where you live. And it also helps to know if you have property in another district, or you have lived in another district, or have some other kind of close relationship. We want to, especially on Lobby Day, on Advocacy Day on March 27th, pair you with lawmakers where you have a connection. So please fill out the registration link, and we will train you and set up a second webinar to go over all of the talking points for those meetings.
So yeah, and so those are the two really important in-person things that you can do. And in this day and age, it's still really crucial that people show up and be there in person talking with their lawmakers. But for some of us, you know, there's we just don't have those resources right offhand. And there's some things that we can all do, even if we are doing that, that can also benefit this from right where you're at. First things first, this is actually another way that you can show up and be there in person is to testify at those House and Senate committee meetings like I was talking about earlier. You know, definitely let us know if you're interested in doing that. That's one of those things that, like I said, flexibility is the name of that game. There may just be a few days to show up. The good news is that with the kinds of bills that we're doing, if they're going to, the way that they're going to move, that we might have as much as a week ahead of time to let you know what's going to happen. So let us know if you're interested in doing that. We'd love to have you out for those hearings as well. We're also going to be, there's also going to be a lot of online and digital things that you can do. First things first is signing, is when we send you those petitions in the email or when you see them on social media, definitely take a second to sign them. The way that it works is when you sign it sends an email to your lawmakers. The more of those emails we generate, the bigger of an impact it can have. The other cool thing is that you can do is you can share that with your friends and family. I don't know who's making the noise there, but it's all good. That we can share with friends and family. And when you do that, it will take their address and it will connect them to their lawmakers also. So definitely make sure to share all of the online forms that we send around too. We also ask people to sometimes make telephone calls. You know, the telephone is it's kind of a ladder of engagement, right? They get a bunch of emails and they're like, oh, that's a lot of emails. But they get a bunch of phone calls like, wow, this is really starting to impact our operations as an office. When we ask you to make those calls, take a second to make those calls. It's 10 seconds for you. But if everybody we send them to takes that 10 seconds, we can tie up their phone lines and make it and get them begging us to stop the calls. And what we tell them when they make those begging pleas is we need you to vote the way we want you to vote. So that's how we get this stuff done. We're also going to be fundraising throughout the session. You know, we cannot do this without money. And so the folks that can give, please do. And in fact, tonight, as you're on your computer right now, if you're nearby your computer, if you're on the phone, jump over to texasenvironment.org/donate, or I believe Melanie will probably put it in the chat window here in a second, and take a second to contribute whatever you can tonight. $15, $25, $50, $100, all of that adds up and makes it possible for us to do this work. So definitely give what you can. And then the last thing is actually one of the most interesting opportunities I think we have, which is that TCE actually participates in a statewide coalition called the Alliance for a Clean Texas. ACT is how it goes by with an acronym. ACT is, like I said, it's a statewide coalition, and into the session, starting in the next few weeks, they're going to have a weekly conference call every Sunday night where you can call in, and obviously the folks on this right now don't mind taking a little bit of time to call in and listen and talk about the environment, but you can connect and hear about the statewide issues that ACT is working on. Some weeks it'll be our issues, but other weeks it's going to be some of the other issues dealing with air, water, and land that a lot of our allies like Sierra Club and Clean Water Action and Environment Texas and other groups, all the things that they're working on. So definitely stay tuned. We'll get that information out to you when that comes out so that you can connect on those. It's usually Sunday afternoons or evenings. So definitely stay tuned for that. Yeah, so I think we've got some resources here on the next page. We clicked over that. A lot of the things that we've been talking about, you can see some of the committees that have already been assigned. You can see some of the websites keeping up with things, places to register to stay tuned and to get involved, and a way to make contributions tonight right there. I believe we're going to go ahead and start with we have about 15 minutes left to do some question and answer and to do some discussion here. Robin, did you want to, are you leading that up, or Melanie, or am I doing that?
Let's see if we had any questions in the chat that did not get answered yet. If you have been hanging on to a question, please go ahead and type it in there.
And we want to take to the phones as well in just a moment. Anybody who's on the telephone, we can let people on the phone join in as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm unmuting Scott Jones because he's got a question.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I just typed this up on the chat. So our Galveston Bay Foundation organization covers a large watershed. But when I'm sending emails to my elected officials, am I technically limited to the district in which our physical address is located? I mean, I've called them before and told them our mission is broad.
I would say that, you folks, work in the whole Galveston Bay area, that it's, as an organization, you should approach all of those legislators. But if you can, find actual constituents, people who live in each of those districts, and have them be approaching those state legislators, those are their voters, and that can be very powerful.
Great idea.
Yeah, and if I could jump in real quick, Scott, I would also say to definitely connect with Melanie here, and for y'all to put your heads together, because I think that this can be a really awesome opportunity for some volunteer development among your members, and y'all can identify the folks there and then identify the best legislators and set up those district meetings. If you've got your foundation plus your volunteers and everything there in those meetings, that makes a huge impact. And some of those legislators on the Galveston Bay there have a big impact on these issues.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Kelly. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Kelly. And Kelly said he teaches middle school. There he is.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, so definitely passionate about everything you're trying to do, but I do teach middle schoolers. I don't have a ton of time. What has anyone ever just strategies for what I could do in my classroom without being overly political to try to educate my students? Certainly science is definitely a weapon, but just curious as to what else you might think the options would be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I got a call from the girls, someone who leads a Girl Scout troop out in Katy, and she said that they're thinking about collecting batteries to be recycled. And then we would share that story on social media as a way to promote the battery recycling program. So it really depends on whether your students in your school would totally not allow anything related to legislation to be promoted and associated with the students. If that's okay, there are lots of opportunities. If not, there are things that you can do as an individual.
Yeah, and I think that one of the secrets, I think everything that Melanie said is absolutely true, and please do all that. I also think that, part of good organizing is, is making other people into organizers, like turning you into an organizer, Kelly, and then turning your students into organizers, right? And I think that part of this process is going to be, it would be to see if it's okay for them not necessarily to write about a specific numbered bill, because I can understand that. But, just learning who their legislators are and learning how to write to them and just say, hey, I care about the environment. I care about recycling. And I want you to make sure that that we have the best possible recycling in the healthiest possible environment. You send those kinds of letters, it'll make an impact, especially if it's from kids. They notice those in those legislative offices.
Mm-hmm. All right. Cool.
All right. I'm going to unmute Kathy. She has a question.
I was just wanted to ask about media coverage. Any plans to do like editorial board meetings? I work in environmedia, so that's why I was just
yay
coverage. Yeah, to see if there are any plans for that. Either the editorial board meetings or writing op-eds, because all these issues have such great news value, each and every one of them, and how they impact all Texans. So I just. That's what I would recommend right off top is editorial board meetings, op-eds, of course, TV interviews with some morning shows, midday shows, that sort of thing. These are great topics that everyone needs to know about.
Kathy, thanks so much for your question and for working at an agency that is so committed to protecting the environment. We really appreciate the work and support of Enviromedia. And yes, we do actively go after editorial boards to talk about this issue. We've had a lot of coverage, especially on the local control front so far, with a lot of editorials about local controls. Some of them mention bags, some do not. But we also are very much known to have press conferences and other kind of press events at the state capitol and other places, generating letters to the editor, and that's actually something that anybody can do, is to generate a letter to the editor. If you have a special angle on an issue, we can work with you to write an op-ed, a longer piece potentially for a newspaper. And you know, Kathy, if you are interested in helping, we'd love your insight and your advice. It's always great to have fresh eyes, and that goes for anybody else here who has a lot of newspapers.
Well, I know Valerie Davis, our co-founder and CEO, is very passionate about this project, and so she wanted to make sure I was here. She's actually on the plane now, or she would probably be on this with me. So just know, absolutely, we're here to support your efforts and appreciate the work you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Yeah, and I think that we'll be definitely doing quite a bit of press stuff during the session, so stay tuned on that. Who was next? Oh, real quick. Go ahead.
One thing I realized is that people who are tuning into this webinar just on the phone don't have a way of asking questions because they are muted. So I want to take just a moment to unmute the people that are here on the phone, just in case you all have something to ask. Is anybody there? If you have a question from the phones, let us know right now. Okay. Well, Patton had a question.
Well, I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is Lori McNaughton. I came in. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I knew it was you as soon as you started talking.
Okay. I came in late. Hi. I'm sorry. I came in late, and you may have covered this, and please don't feel obligated to reiterate. But I was just wondering if there is a site you recommend that we go to so that we can follow important bills as they come up.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. The Texas Legislature Online, which you can Google that and find it, it's usually www.legis.texas.gov, I guess. They've changed the conventions. Melanie's going to look for it and put it in the chat when that doesn't help you, Lou, but we know how to get a hold of you. That's a group. That's a good place to keep track of them. And I think so that's a really good place. You can sign up for an account there, and you can flag bills, and it'll alert you when they start moving. And it's free, and it's provided by the state.
Okay.
One of those ways that Texas actually is not that bad compared to other states is that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there someone else on the phones that wanted to pipe up? It looked like there was another person.
Okay. Patton had a comment. Patton, I'm going to unmute you. We're just keeping people on mute so we don't have a lot of background noise here. Okay, Patton. Well, he posted it in the text box here.
We got Caldwell County well represented here.
Okay, interested in stopping landfills from being placed in aquifer recharge zones and areas that will leak into our water sources. Any long-term strategy thoughts for that?
Yeah, I think that starts this session with some of the bills that we're up. He's not on the phone. We had you unmuted, Patton. Did you want to elaborate on that? I think you're still unmuted, right, Melanie? Patton, you can speak up.
No, he's not.
Okay. It's not working. Sorry about that. I must not have a good microphone. No worries, Patton. Appreciate you typing it in. I think that it starts with the stuff that we're talking about this session, which has a lot to do with how permits are issued altogether on these things. I think that if, in y'all's case, for those who don't know, both Lou, who just spoke, and Patton just now have been part of fighting a proposed landfill in Caldwell County, just southeast of Austin. Some of the other folks that we've known in Waller County and elsewhere have been doing this too. I think that some of these permitting issues can slow down the worst processes and start to get legislators familiar with the fact that these things are going. I think that it's really crucial for grassroots groups like y'all to stay connected to your lawmakers and to stay active, and to, most importantly, because staying active over a period of years can wear people out, to be going out and recruiting new people and to be building that new generation of activist leadership in your community. I think as you can do that, we can stay connected to these folks. We can start getting some of these bills passed that are starting out this session, and we can really just kind of keep the ball rolling because it's definitely a long-term project.
Yeah, long-term, eliminating the need for landfills is our core of our organization and our mission long-term. And the way you do it is by statewide recycling and composting, local policies like local zero waste plans, getting apartments to recycle. You know, there are even states where they have a ban on organic waste going into landfills. And so food and organic waste has to be composted, and that's a whole new industry that, you know, we want to see take the place of landfills in Texas.
Two questions here, if I could just kind of take care of them really quickly. I think Gregory Foster, he put up something about permitting, transparency, ease of access. It's a good project for Open Austin, which is a great kind of local nonprofit activist group that works on open information, as I understand it. It does sound like that sounds like we would love to connect with y'all. I think the best thing to do would be to email me. I'm actually going to switch the slide there to our contact information, dobbs@texasenvironment.org. It's right there. Shoot me an email and we'll get back to you on that, because I think that we would love to see what the possibilities there are. And then Scott Jones asked a question about a bill that he's been working on with the State Department of Health Services, and about working with Larry Taylor's office, Sylvia Garcia. It's kind of a complex procedural question and strategic question. Why don't you shoot an email to maybe at least me and Melanie, since Melanie's down there closer to you. If not, and Robin too is fine, so that we can kind of put our heads together and talk about that offline, where we can kind of sink our teeth into it a little bit. I think that would work better. If that's thanks, and he says thanks, we'll do. So thank you.
Well, it's 7 o'clock and we didn't want to overstay our welcome. I want to thank all of you who participated today, and please do fill out the
registration form for Lobby Day and for district meetings, volunteering in general.
And feel free to email any of us, robin@texasenvironment.org. If you have feedback for us on this webinar, we'd love to hear it. We are planning another one for, is it March 21st?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have a
calendars, March 21st, for our follow-up webinar in advance of our Advocacy Day. That's when all the bills that will have been introduced, the bills are starting to be heard, so that's a really good time to check in, and we can kind of let you know where things are at, what defensive battles have come up that we weren't aware of. So we hope to have you back, and feel free to invite others on March 21st. Thanks again for all that you do for the environment and public health in Texas and for TCE, and we really appreciate you being a part of this.
Thank you all.
Thanks, y'all. See you soon.